Human Rights Commissions. The constitutional or the statutory provisions relating to the National Human Rights Commission. How effective the National Human Rights Commission have been in protecting the human rights in India. Constitutional and statutory provisions. The National Human Rights Commission was established under the protection. So it is established under the protection of the Human Rights Act. 1993. So this is in 1993. The National Human Rights Commission was established under the, we have the protection of the Human Rights Act. So we will be having the protection of Human Rights Act, and this act is 1993. So protection of the Human Rights Act 1993. The Commission is tasked with the protection and promotion of the human rights as defined in the Act to include rights relating to life, liberty, equality, dignity of the individual guaranteed by the Constitution or embodied in the international covenants. Protection of the Human Rights Act 1993. So human rights is a statutory body, right? Establishes the National Human Rights Commission, and it also defines the powers, functions and its composition. Composition is the chairman who has been the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He is an ex-Chief Justice, right? So who has been the Chief Justice, with members of the judicial human rights background, ex-officio chairmen from the National Commissions of Minorities, SCs, ST, women, right? Functions and the powers. Inquiring into human rights violation, intervening in the court proceedings, reviewing the safeguards provided under the Constitution and the laws, promoting research and awareness on the human rights issues. Effectiveness, investigative role. National Human Rights Commission has been instrumental in highlighting the human rights violations and making sure recommendations to the government. It has conducted numerous investigations such as police excesses, bonded labor and discrimination. Judicial interventions. The National Human Rights Commission interventions has often led to judicial pronouncements strengthening the human rights protections. Policy influence. The Commission's recommendations have influenced policy changes and legislative amendments aimed at better protecting the human rights. However, the National Human Rights Commission has faced several challenges like enforcement limitations. The National Human Rights Commission's recommendations are not binding. That is why we call it as enforcement limitations. When its recommendations are not binding, we call it as a enforcement limitations, which limits its powers to enforce the compliance. Resource constraints. The Commission often struggles with inadequate resources and manpower, affecting its efficiency. Political and bureaucratic interference. Instances of political and bureaucratic interference has undermined its effectiveness. Now, we have the relevant articles in the Constitution which is related to the human rights. Article 21 is right to life and personal liberty. Article 32 and is constitutional remedies, right? Rights to constitutional remedies. Article 32 and 226. So we have the constitutional remedies as Article 32 and 226. D.K. Basu versus State of West Bengal laid down guidelines to prevent the custodial torture. This is a very important case. D.K. Basu versus the State of West Bengal. So we have it as D.K. Basu as a state of West Bengal in 1997. It laid down guidelines to prevent the custodial torture. We need to prevent custodial torture, right? Custodial torture guidelines, and to prevent that custodial torture is D.K. Basu. So we will be having the D.K. Basu versus the state of West Bengal. We have the state of West Bengal is in 1997. So D.K. Basu versus the state of West Bengal 1997. It laid down the guidelines to prevent the custodial torture and protect the human rights. Now critically examine, assess the role of National Human Rights Commission in addressing issues of police brutality and custodial violence in India. Police brutality and custodial violence remain significant human rights concerns in India. The National Human Rights Commission has been proactive in addressing these issues through its investigating and advisory roles. It does not have enforcing its decisions are not binding. Therefore, we say it as enforcement limitation on the human rights, right? Investigative powers. It conducts suo motu investigations, whereas CVC cannot contain suo motu investigations, whereas Human Rights Commission can contain, but it is not having a binding. Right, it is not binding. The verdict of Human Rights Nation Human Rights Commission is not binding, non-binding. So it can conduct suo motu investigations or inquiries based on petitions relating to custodial violence and police brutality. It has documented numerous cases and made recommendations for action against guilty officers. Officials, guidelines and recommendations. The Commission has issued guidelines to law enforcement agencies on the treatment of detainees and prevention of torture. It has recommended measures such as mandatory medical examination of the detainees, installation of the CCTV cameras in the police station. Public hearing. The National Human Rights Commission conducts public hearings and open forums to gather testimonies and evidence related to police excesses, which have helped in bringing transparency and accountability. Judicial interventions have often approached the Supreme Court and the High Courts to seek redressal in several cases of the human rights violations by the police. Its intervention lead to landmark judgments aimed at curbing the custodial violence. Challenges is there are non-binding recommendations. Non-binding nature of the National Human Rights Commissions, it limits their impact as authorities are not compelled to act on them. Delay in the justice. Prolonged delay, legal processes and bureaucratic delays often impede timely justice for the victims. Resistance from law enforcement. Law enforcement agencies sometimes resist the National Human Rights Commission's intervention, citing autonomy and operational constraints. Despite these challenges, National Human Rights Commission consistent effort has been brought significant attention to issue of custodial violence, leading to increased public awareness and some policy changes. However, the need for strong enforcement mechanisms and better cooperation for law enforcement agencies remain crucial for more effective outcomes. Relevant articles is 21 is right to life and personal liberty, 22 is protection against arrest and detention in certain cases. D.K. Basu vs. State of West Bengal 1997 established guidelines to prevent custodial deaths. Prahash Singh vs. Union of India 2006 directed police reforms to ensure accountability and reduce the instances of police excesses. Now we have two most important cases. The first one is D.K. Basu. I'm going to write these cases. D.K. Basu versus State of West Bengal. This is West Bengal, right? The D.K. Basu case is in the West Bengal. D.K. Basu versus State of the West Bengal in 1971. Sorry, 1997. 1997. So D.K. Basu versus State of West Bengal in 1997. Guidelines is there to prevent custodial torture. There is custodial torture. Guidelines to prevent the custodial torture. Then Prakash Singh versus Union of India in 2006. So we have the Prakash Singh. Prakash Singh versus Union of India. So we have Prakash Singh versus Union of India 2006. Here this needs the police reforms for PP, right? Prakash Singh versus Union of India is for police reforms. The police reforms is to ensure accountability and to reduce the instances of police excesses. Discuss the challenges faced by the National Human Rights Commission in protection and promotion of human rights in India. Limited enforcement powers, resource constraints, political and bureaucratic interference, delayed justice, awareness and accessibility to overcome strengthening the legal framework and a constitutional guarantee, enhancing the resources and independence, expedited processes, making the binding legal, awareness campaigns, collaboration with civil society. Articles is 21, 32, 22, 26. D.K. Basu versus the State of West Bengal 1987. Prevent custodial torture. S.R. Bommai case versus the Union of India 1994. Is importance of federalism and non-interference in the independent bodies. National Human Rights Commission is safeguarding the rights of marginalized communities. Actually, we have National Commission for SC, National Commission for ST, and we also have National Commission for Women, protection of the child rights. Therefore, we have specific commissions with respect to communities, right? Despite this, impact on marginalized communities, investigation and the reports. National Human Rights Commission has conducted investigations and released reports on issues affecting the marginalized communities like Dalits, Adivasis, women and children. These reports have highlighted systematic discrimination and abuses prompting government action. Legal interventions. National Human Rights Commission has filed petitions in the court to protect the rights of marginalized communities, leading to landmark judgments. For example, its intervention has resulted to stronger legal protections for the SC and the ST communities under the SC and the ST Prevention of Atrocities Act. Awareness and advocacy. National Human Rights Commission has organized a campaign and workshops to raise awareness about the rights of marginalized communities. These efforts have empowered the individuals and communities to stand up against discrimination and injustice. Policy recommendations. These commissions has made numerous recommendations for the government for policy changes aimed at improving the socio-economic conditions of marginalized communities. These include recommendations for affirmative action, better health care, education, and social security measures. Collaborations with the NGOs. National Human Rights Commissions collaborates with the non-governmental organizations working at the grassroots level. These partnerships have enhanced the Commission's outreach and effectiveness in addressing the needs of marginalized groups. What are the challenges? Enforcement and implementation. The non-binding nature of the National Human Rights Commission's recommendations often result in poor implementation by the authorities. Systematic issues. Deep-rooted social prejudices and systematic inequalities pose significant challenge to the protection of marginalized communities. Resource limitations. Inadequate resource limits National Human Rights Commission's ability to cover all the regions and issues comprehensively. Success stories is bonded labor. National Human Rights Commission's interventions have led to rescue and rehabilitation of numerous bonded laborers, highlighting the prevalence of this issue and pushing for stricter enforcement of the relevant laws. Violence against the women. National Human Rights Commission's efforts have brought attention to violence against women, resulting in policy changes and stricter laws to protect women's rights. Relevance is Article 14, right to equality. Article 15 is prohibition of discrimination on the ground of religion, race, caste, sex, and place of birth. Article 17 is abolition of untouchability. 46 is promotion of the education and economic interests of the SC, ST, and weaker sections. Indra Swani, which is the Union of India upheld the reservation of the OBCs, reinforcing affirmative action for marginalized communities. Nagaraj versus Union of India affirmed the validity of reservations and promotions for SCs and STs. So we have Indira Swani cases 1992. Indira Swani in 1992, it upheld the reservations. So there is a reservation for the OBCs. There is a reservation for OBCs, right? Reinforcing the affirmative action. And Nagaraj versus Union of India is 2006, where validity of reservations and promotions for SCs and STs. National Human Rights Commissions plays a crucial role in the protection and promotion of the human rights in India, particularly for marginalized communities. While it has made significant strides, challenges remain that needs to be addressed through legal, institutional, and societal reforms.